Take your seat, settle in, and listen up. Gophers 101 is underway and in session. It's time to go to class and talk all things Gophers.
Well, Manny Hill, why not fire this thing up and go live for this edition of Gophers 101? Because your Gophers, Manny Hill, our Gophers, are 1-0 in Rate Bowl championship season. PJ Fleck is 7-0 in bowl games at the University of Minnesota. Your Golden Gophers have won 9 consecutive bowl games dating back to the Jerry Kill regime, into the Tracy Claeys regime, into the PJ Fleck regime. I'm having trouble really trying to process what it was that we watched, Manny. I mean, so often in these bowl games, you don't always get Picassos, but it is fun to win them. And the second half, much more entertaining than the first half.
Yeah, that first half was, I remember you texted me. What did you, I got to grab my phone now. What did you text me at the end of the first half? Well, the first half was so bad that I had actually dozed off towards the end of it. It was so bad so I actually missed kind of the last the last couple of possessions of the first half. But yeah, that was bad. But you know, to the Gophers' credit, they turned things around in the second half. Drake Lindsey looked really uncomfortable in the first half, and I don't know if it was, you know, some of the pressure that New Mexico was able to apply from a pass rushing standpoint. I think at times he was holding on to the ball a little bit too long, taking a little bit too long to go through his progressions and his reads and everything. But I think they kind of got, well, first off, they got Darius Taylor going in the running game. I think that was huge, and I think that kind of opened things up for them. But I think they kind of went to a little bit of a quicker, you know, pass game for Lindsey to kind of get him more into a rhythm in the latter half of the game. And I think that kind of worked out better for them. They were able to kind of move the ball a little bit better. But really, I think, you know, I think the credit really should go to the Gophers defense and, you know, the plays that they were able to make, holding New Mexico to 204 yards of total offense, just 88 yards in the air. You know, New Mexico was able to run the ball a little bit on them at times, and that's been kind of a little bit of a frustrating point from the Gophers defense this year. But I think overall it was really good. You know, at least from a defensive standpoint, it was really good. And you know, you find a way to win in overtime. And as I've always said, you hear me say this all the time when we get to bowl season, 8-5 looks a lot better than 7-6. 9-4 looks a lot better than 8-5. So the Gophers finish 8-5 for 2025, and hopefully now you can take that momentum into next year.
Yeah, big picture here, Manny. I think one thing, and maybe I'll be accused of being too negative here, but one thing that I liked about this game in a good way, kind of a microcosm of the Gopher season, you saw what their issues were, but you also saw what they were largely able to do well at times, and also what they were able to overcome. Today, one of the few days, Manny, where they were penalized a fair amount, actually more than their opponent. Sometimes, though, I wonder how much of that is just having a long layoff. You know, Gophers had not played since late November, basically a month. When was Wisconsin? November 27th, 29th, somewhere around there. So you're off for basically a month. New Mexico had played a little more recent, I think a week later than the Gophers, although I'll be honest, I could be wrong on that. Now that I think about it, I think I am wrong because I keep thinking New Mexico played in the Mountain West Championship game. They did not. They lost some tiebreakers there. But again, the Gophers did not turn the ball over today. They did get some big stops defensively when they needed them. And I would say this again about Drake Lindsey. I don't think it was his finest hour, but when they needed him to step up and make plays and lead the team down the field, he did that. Say what you want about the play in overtime. I think that was easily don't pick it, don't pick it, don't pick it. Yes, touchdown. Yeah. I think that's exactly what that pass was. He probably regretted it the moment he let it go. But Jalen Smith, 6 catches, over 60 yards, 2 great touchdowns. A nice game for him. I'm not going to form many grandiose opinions off of this game. I think it's really tough with bowl games these days. But one thing I will throw out, and PJ Fleck talked about this I think leading up to the Rate Bowl with their Rate Bowl press conference, maybe within the last week, he talked about, we just prepare for bowl games here differently, and we like the way that we prepare for bowl games. We also have learned that contractually now with some of their agreements with players, they have incentives built in to play in the bowl games. Not a ton of opt-outs for the Gophers. Did not see Femi Ichiboy, who entered the transfer portal. Lamecki Brockington is off to the NFL. He didn't play. Largely, most guys did, though. And oh, by the way, Anthony Smith has a monster game, Manny, and good news for Gophers fans, announces after the game that he is coming back next season. I also still think there's a chance awesome. Darius Taylor comes back next season. I guess we don't know about Koi, but the fact that Koi played in the bowl game, and I think, by the way, played fairly well, that's the stuff I'm taking away from this game, is the positive vibes after the game. And again, just not your best performance, but to be able to work through it and find a way to win the game, I think speaks volumes of the coaching staff and the players. And I'm happy for Drake Lindsay to finish this year strong as far as getting a win, feel confident going into the offseason, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I think, certainly with Drake, I think at times it was a bit of a mixed bag. There were some really good moments, really strong moments. And then you get, the Iowa game, the Oregon game, those types of performances were not great at all. But I think sort of the overall resiliency, I think, by him at such a young age, being a redshirt freshman, I think really kind of showed. And I think he has the makings of a good leader of a huddle. And I think that's going to be really important going forward too. And that's going to be something that they're going to need, with certain guys, whether they're graduating or leaving early to go off to the NFL, or if they're entering the transfer portal. I think having some continuity at the quarterback position going into next year, and a guy who still has a lot of room to grow, but obviously has some ability to be a pretty good Big Ten quarterback, I think that's going to really bode well for him and for the program going forward. So I think that form of stability is going to be really good. And I think, he showed that he can do this, that he can play this position and play fairly well at it. And I think what you're really looking for him now going forward is just the steady improvements. You just hope that he's a better quarterback in 2026 than he was in 2025. And 2025 wasn't terrible. He was, he, like I said before, he had some really good moments, had some moments that you'd like to, maybe have back, but that comes with having a young quarterback. So the growth and development, I think, is the most important thing for him, and sort of the resiliency to sort of fight through some of the difficult times and difficult games on the road that they had this year with the tougher opponents. I think he was able to kind of bounce back nicely from some of those low points of the season. So I think that speaks a lot to his character and the leadership that he has. And you just hope that next year we can see an even better version of him.
I think if you're trying to extrapolate out from here, if you kind of put the bowl game in the rearview mirror, at least for the next few minutes of this conversation, I think the best ways to help him are going to be in that transfer portal, seeing if you can find a few more weapons at wide receiver. We know they were thin at wide receiver heading into the bowl game because of Brockington opting for the draft or declaring for the draft, and also Malachi Coleman, who didn't catch a ton of balls, but he was on the field from time to time, entered the transfer portal. He did not play tonight. So I think you need to find him some more receivers out on the edge, but also, Manny, I think to your point, we've seen that he does like to hold on to the ball a little bit. Yep. One thing that I think can help him in that regard is just an offensive line that can hold up a touch longer, because it is a fine line. You do want your quarterback to hold on to the ball a bit, especially if it's long developing routes. Well, you can't always hit those long developing routes if you don't have enough time to make the pass. And I do think oftentimes this year, especially against some of the stiffer competition defensively, he didn't quite have those chances. So I think this offensive line, we know it has to be better. I think it was okay, mid, when it comes to pass protection. I think in the run game, you can't have a running back as good as Darius Taylor and have the year that he had this year. So that part needs to be better. I think the best way to help Drake Lindsay is whether it's using all that new Cub Foods money or just, via good sit-down conversations with players in the portal and say, we think you can succeed and help here. I think job number one is offensive linemen and receivers just to help the kid out a little bit. I trust no matter what they do at running back, they're going to be fine, Manny. They always find running backs. And anytime one goes down, the next man comes up, and albeit he might not be as good as the starter, ends up having a pretty good season. Femi Chaboy this year, I don't think anybody expected him to rush for almost 500 yards, and he did. So I think they're going to be fine there. I think the big things for Drake are shore up that offensive line, find a few more weapons for him. But then the team as a whole, I don't know, again, if it's schematics. My gut would tell me the head coach thinks it was more personnel because the only changes he made on defense was the defensive line coach. So I think you just need to find a little bit better, a way to get a little bit better and a bit more stout defensively as well. It happened again today. At one point, New Mexico was 8 of 13 on third down, and their average yards to go was almost 7 yards. You can't routinely give up 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s. And this defense did that all season long, which again, Manny, to me is a credit. I'll be honest, this is where I'll be a bit negative, as I alluded to a little bit ago. I don't think this Gophers team is very good. And Drake Lindsay and PJ dragged them to an 8-win season. That to me is a really good sign that I still do think you have the right head coach in place and the right quarterback, but now you need to be able to go out, win some recruiting battles, win in the transfer portal. And for me, Manny, looking ahead next year, to me, the number's about 8 wins. I think you should hopefully go 8 wins or better in the regular season because you should show growth. You went 7-5 this year. Go 8-4 or better next year. Get a nice win at home. Win another rivalry game. Beat Iowa at home. Go to Wisconsin again and win the Axe again. Let's do a couple of those things to keep building momentum. And I'm not just crediting the bowl game. I think the bowl games are probably slightly more important than we want to give them credit for. It's apparent the coaching staff takes them seriously. So overall, good season, but there is still a lot of work to be done here in the offseason for the program.
I think to get to an 8-5 record, including the bowl game, with a redshirt freshman quarterback for this program, I think is a good sign. I think we want to see them certainly, going into next year, you want to hope that they can be better about playing on the road. Now, they had some really, really tough challenges on the road. You got to go to Eugene and Columbus being 2 of your road games. That's a lot to ask, to go on the road and win those games. And obviously, they were just so overmatched in both of those matchups. But, and obviously I haven't looked at the schedule for 2026, but I believe with them going to Kinnick Stadium this year, Iowa figures to be coming to Huntington Bank Stadium next year. But I think those types of opponents, though, the Iowas, the Northwesterns, the Wisconsins, and they've been able to win some games at Camp Randall in years past. But those are the type of Big Ten road games. Can you go into I think they figured to be going to Lincoln next year. Can you find a way to get a win over Nebraska? Again, I haven't looked at exactly what the schedule is, but if you're going to Lincoln next year, can you find a way to win that type of game? Those are the type of road games that I would like to see them find a way to win, because you're not guaranteed to just win all of your home games like you did this year, because you don't know what those matchups are going to be and how tough those home opponents are going to be. So I think that's something that I'm looking for next year. And the guys that they have coming back, you mentioned the defense. Ross, would like to see, from a defensive standpoint, I would like to see someone other than, and it's great that Anthony Smith is coming back next year. That's huge. It's going to be huge for this defense. I would like to see someone other than him on this defense next year be able to get after the quarterback, because when he's not able to get pressure and apply pressure to opposing quarterbacks, that's when this defense really seems to struggle, because they're just not able to get any pressure from anybody else. And then the coverage breaks down, and then that's how those 3rd and 8, 3rd and 11s end up being converted by other teams, because they're not able to get enough pressure on the quarterback. So that's going to be big. Can they find someone else besides Anthony Smith that can be a sort of a dominant pass rusher in that front? I think that'll help their defense as well.
Yeah, and I know Devin Eastern was injured off and on throughout the season, didn't play in the bowl game. I think that plays a part in that. I think what I'm looking at specifically is they got to be better at the linebacker position, and they're going to have to be better at cornerback, which I want to get back to momentarily. On the schedule, Manny, next year, Big Ten home games are Iowa, Michigan, Northwestern, and UCLA. Depending on what Michigan looks like, I mean, there's nothing that says you can't go 4-0 against those teams, but can you at least go 3-1? Road games, you will be at Indiana, at Penn State, at Purdue, at Washington, and Wisconsin. But again, I would look at that, Manny, and say they're not all easy, but you can win 5 or 6 games there, hopefully. I mean, who knows what the team looks like? Injuries always play a role in these things. You get Eastern Illinois for 100 fictitious points. Do you remember Eastern Illinois' name?
I think it's Western Illinois is the Salukis, right? That's where Jerry Kill was.
Or is that's Southern Illinois?
Southern Illinois, okay. Jerry was at Southern Illinois, right?
That's a good question.
Before he got
was
to
at
Northern Illinois? Yeah. I mean, that's a side note, but okay. Eastern Illinois. Isn't that where Tony Romo went? Is that where Tony Romo played college ball at?
You are hitting me with all these questions I don't have the answers to, but I do know it probably was Eastern Illinois because it was one of those schools. So I'm going to say yes to that. Eastern Illinois is the Panthers.
Okay.
Western Illinois is the Leathernecks.
The Leathernecks. Okay. And Southern Illinois must be the Salukis.
The Salukis, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Gophers have played Western Illinois before. Earlier when I looked at their schedule, I thought it was the Leathernecks, but I just learned a few seconds ago that it's the Panthers. Glad I double checked that. So you get Eastern Illinois at home, Mississippi State. Who knows what that looks like? Mississippi State's always up and down SEC team. You know, they have great talent. And then you're going to get Akron at home. So I would say this, Manny, at bare minimum, you have to at least be 7-5 next year. But if they could find a way to win 8 or more games, I think that would be growth off of this season. I mentioned I want to circle back to the secondary. Plenty of issues with the secondary all year, mainly that they were never in the area of any receiver they should be covering. That's the main issue. Whether it was man-to-man coverage or zone coverage, I hate using these words, but it was borderline incompetent. Teams could pretty much have whatever they want. But I will say this, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but where would this team be without John Nestor? The kid's a pretty good player. I mean, I think he has limitations, and we know that. I don't think he can cover everybody in the Big Ten, but he has shown this year when given the opportunity, which he got plenty of run here, he can cover and hang with most players in the Big Ten. If the Gophers didn't have John Nestor playing cornerback this year, I don't think they win more than 6 games.
Yeah, I think defensively as a whole, I mentioned the pass rushing, finding somebody outside of Anthony Smith that can get after the quarterback a little bit. That's going to be big. You mentioned the linebacking core needs to be, there needs to be some improvement there. In the secondary too, can you find somebody that can, Koi is a safety, and if he does come back next year, that position is solidified. But can you find a corner opposite of John Nestor that can maybe take some pressure off of him so that you don't need him to cover the opposing team's number one corner or number one receiver week in and week out, because that's a lot to ask for someone who is a good, solid player, but not a great player. A great cover corner can handle that assignment week in and week out. And those things don't grow on trees. So, it's a tough task to find somebody that can actually step into that role. But can you find another quality corner that's on a similar level as a John Nestor that can sort of take the pressure off of him a little bit? And like you said, kind of solidify the pass coverage a little bit more. Again, can you make some incremental improvements? Obviously, the defense had its struggles over the course of the year, but can you make those little improvements at every level, at the line, in the linebacker spot, and in the secondary? Can you just make some slight improvements at a position or two at each one of those levels? And then I think you can at least have a defense that's not going to get shredded by a struggling Northwestern offense at Wrigley Field like they were a month ago. Those are the type of things that you have to kind of avoid when you look ahead to next year's schedule. So can you just make some slight improvements, take some pressure off of Anthony Smith, take some pressure off of John Nestor, take some pressure off of Koi Parish for that matter, and in the linebacker core, can you get some improvements there too? I think that'll really help this defense and at least get them to a level where they're kind of middle of the pack, at least in the Big Ten. And that'll give you a chance to compete, I think, in a lot of these games and give you a chance to really, win a game that maybe you shouldn't necessarily on paper win, but because you have enough on defense to kind of make some stops and you do enough on offense and you can pull out a win against, I don't know, a Michigan at home next year, or dare I say, going into Bloomington and finding a way to beat Indiana. Indiana might not be the same team that they are this year, especially if Mendoza goes off to the draft. So there's going to be some opportunities. Can you just make some incremental improvements to give yourself a better chance to compete against opponents that are above you?
I think the biggest thing defensively, Manny, that helps with those making those incremental improvements and looking better all across the board is oftentimes this year we would watch games and it would be, oh, what is Koi doing? He's out of position. Or, oh, Kerry Brown out of position. Yeah. Well, oftentimes those guys are out of position because they're covering up for other people who have missed assignments, blown assignments, correct, not in the right place. To your point, if you can get incrementally, I'm really struggling to talk today. I should have more of this zero sugar, zero caffeine A&W. Hashtag not a sponsor. 1 second. Okay, good reset. If you can get better at those positions, it makes Koi Parish and Kerry Brown better because they can do what they're actually supposed to be doing. And I don't know if you can assume this, but I don't believe the best version of Koi Parish is the Koi that we saw in his freshman year. And I don't think the worst version of him is what we saw this year. I actually, second half of the year, he was largely fine. He struggled the first half of the year. If he looks more like he did in his first year at the University of Minnesota, that can really help this team. But I think he can only do that if you're better, to your point, Manny, get pressure on the quarterback. The linebacker plays maybe a bit more stout. And, oh, by the way, on 3rd and 15, when guys are dropping back into massive zones, they're not drifting too far back or too far forward, and you're actually able to cover some of these receivers going over the middle. I would say this about tonight. If New Mexico had better quarterback play, they probably would have won tonight. But again, the Gophers were able to do enough to win. On Koi specifically, maybe something will change. Maybe something has happened since we started. I do expect him to be back. I didn't see any announcement in the postgame yet. I know they said there were more to come in the days and weeks after the game. I would suspect that he's back. If he's back, Manny, and I think I know the answer here. I think the Gophers had to use him offensively tonight out of necessity.
Yeah.
I think I saw enough this year to avoid doing that. Just let him focus on returning punts, returning kicks, and playing defense. I don't know if I need to see the gadget plays or him just out there running receiver routes. That, not to be mean, in all honesty, your 4th or 5th wide receiver can just get on the field and do that 3 or 4 times a game. I don't think he needs to be using his mental capacity for that, because if this team is going to win 8-9 games, take that step up that we saw in 2019, I need the best version of Koi. And I think even though he was only given the opportunity for about the first half of this season or first 3 or 4 games, I think the best version of him is focusing on defense and kicks and not trying to learn the offensive playbook and being a part of what they're doing offensively.
100% agree. 100% agree. And it doesn't mean that he's not capable of doing these things on offense and being kind of a dynamic part of the offense. But
100%. 100%.
Right. But I think the strength of him and what makes him such a terrific dynamic talent is what he's able to do on the defensive backfield. That's, and I think especially for this defense, they need him to be the elite All-American talent that he has shown flashes of being, certainly as a freshman last year and kind of towards the second half of this year as a sophomore we saw more flashes of him being the dynamic talent that he is. But that needs to be, I think, 100% of his focus. And I'll even go as far as saying this too, Ross. Take him off the field on offense. If he never returns another punt or a kick for the rest of his Gophers career, I'd be fine with that too. If you can find somebody else to take care of that. And I know that he's, he is the type of talent to where you want to get the ball in his hands, because I know that's why they had him on offense. That's why they have him returning kicks and punts, because you get the ball in his hands and he can be very dynamic and very explosive as a returner or get in the open field and make things happen. But I think if you can find somebody else to take over the role for him on special teams and just have him focus on being one of the best safeties in the entire country, that's when you're going to get, I think, the best version of Koi Parish. And that can, we've seen what a dynamic safety can do for this defense. We saw it with Antoine Winfield Jr. and how terrific he was. And Antoine was a guy, he was another one of those guys that, he was returning punts and returning kicks for them, early part of his career. And then they stopped having him do that and just have him focus completely on being a terrific defensive back. And he was awesome. And he got himself drafted in the second round, won a Super Bowl with the Buccaneers and all that good stuff. And now he's one of the best defensive players in the NFL. I think for Koi Parish, not just for his Gophers career, but for what he may potentially be able to do on Sundays when he's done playing college football, I think just having him shift his focus completely to the defensive side of the ball where he is at his absolute best, I think is going to be huge obviously for his Gophers career, whatever's left of it, if it's a year left or if it's 2 years left, whatever it may be. And obviously I think for what he's able to do, what he's going to have the opportunity to do beyond his college football career, I think it's going to be huge for that too. I'd say just let him focus completely on the defensive side.
Here's one for you specifically from tonight. Seeing a couple comments on this in the live chat about the offense struggling tonight. Again, I think it's really tough in bowl games, especially, let's be honest, let's call this a mid-tier. I don't think it's the lowest of the low, but it's definitely not in the top third, just your run-of-the-mill bowl game. I think it's tough to really draw conclusions about what you see for the most part on a micro level, because again, no Brockington tonight. You didn't have your second running back. And Jamison Gears, I think, attempted to play, but I know he came into the game hobbled and injured. I'm not entirely sure I even really saw him out there. I think that's as big a part of the struggles as anything. All year long, the first person Drake Lindsay was looking to for the most part was Le'Meke Brockington, and he didn't have him. Also, as we've talked about, the offensive line play is just, it's not the worst offensive line you'll ever see, but it's certainly not the best. So I think that, to me, explains away a lot of why the offense didn't look good. And, oh, by the way, the metrics show, for whatever they're worth, I know they're playing lesser competition, but New Mexico, I thought New Mexico's defense was fairly stout. I thought they tackled well. They were in the neighborhood of the ball all game long. They knew the Gophers wide receiver screen game. So I think some of it is the layoff. I think some of it is not having Le'Meke Brockington. And I think some of it, you just have to tip your cap to New Mexico, who, again, the stats and the metrics say they're a pretty good defensive team. And I thought they showed that in the bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, they presented some challenges and they were able to, the Gophers offensive line had some struggles in this game, but, New Mexico was able to get some pressure. I mean, that's the other part of it is Nick Saban talked about this all the time when people talked about, if you're not getting enough sacks and things like that, they were able to get to Drake I almost called him Drake May again. They were able to get to Drake Lindsay. I'm a huge Drake May fan for people that are wondering why I get those mixed up, because I'm just
similar body types, Manny. Similar
body types, not quite the same in terms of running around and scrambling. Just a little bit of a difference there, but I digress. New Mexico, they were able to get to Drake Lindsay a little bit, but again, it's a lot of times it's just if you can apply pressure on a quarterback and force him to be uncomfortable, that can impact how he plays as well. And we saw in the first half of the game tonight that New Mexico was able to get some pressure on Drake Lindsay and force him. And, Drake's not a runner at all. Like you don't want him scrambling. And I even texted you about how it just kind of looked a little awkward. No disrespect to him, but just kind of looked awkward when he was trying to like
He
step up in the pocket and try to run. He was just kind of lumbering, and it's just like, no, Drake, that's not what you do, man.
he runs with cement in his shoes, 100,
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think that part of it is, and look, there are quarterbacks that we see at all levels of football that are athletic enough to where if your offensive line isn't stout, they can escape and move around and extend plays and make things happen. Drake Lindsay is not a guy that can do it. Drake May is a guy that can kind of do that, but Drake Lindsay is not a guy that can that you want to rely on having to do that. You want him to be able to sit in the pocket, have some time to throw, go through his reads. Now, you want him to go through those reads pretty quickly and be decisive on what he's going to do. You still don't want him holding on to the ball too long, because quarterbacks, a lot of times when they're holding on to the ball too long, they can kind of create their own pressure and get themselves into trouble. But he's definitely a guy that needs to have all five guys in front of him protecting him and being stout and being strong, being solid, to where he can go through his reads and deliver the football on time and on target. So if they can find ways to do that going into next year, I think it'll bode well for him.
One comment that just popped up from, I'm assuming, an Arizona Packer fan. Thank you for cheering for the Golden Gophers. Happy Minnesota won, but they will always be that middle conference kind of team making those average bowl games, unfortunately. I would largely say I agree with that. But again, as we've talked about numerous times, I don't think that you should discredit that, because it's not easy to do what the Gophers have done. I mean, if you look around college football, I can't think of a bunch of examples off the top of my head, but I would say I think plenty of programs in college football would love to say they've won 8 games or more in 4 of the last 5 seasons. Also, I know the game has changed a little bit, but I still largely believe in the head coach. I think as this new era of college football adapts and everybody grows and learns how to work in it, I don't think he's entirely been left behind. I think there's some things that he and the University of Minnesota could do better. I think there's plenty of things the University of Minnesota could do better that he has nothing to do with. And you and I have talked about those, and Thor Nystrom as well, ad nauseum on these podcasts about needing more support financially. I'm glad to see, bravo, and I'm being dead serious. Round of applause to Cub for stepping up and throwing some money in the kitty to help keep some of these players around. I wish more people would do it. You're a rich Minnesotan that loves football, write out a check. I would donate more money. I'm not sitting on millions or billions of dollars, so it's a bit more difficult for me to do. That doesn't mean that I don't. I think if you believe in the program, you should find ways to support and give them money as you can. But I think that's a part of it. And I do think, I think, Manny, 80% of the time, these are the bowl games you're going to play in. And for the Gophers, unfortunately, they probably deserve slightly better than the Rate Bowl. They should have been in probably Las Vegas or Nashville, but they typically get picked over for a variety of reasons. Some I don't think are entirely fair. I think in the PJ Fleck era, we've seen it. I think they travel to bowl games pretty well. So I'd like to see them get better looks from some of these bowl games. But that doesn't mean that at some point you can't pop back up and win 9 or 10 games, play in a really nice bowl game, or heaven forbid, Manny, be the 9 or 10 seed in the college football playoff. And I know the comments are going to be, nope, can't happen. It'll never happen at Minnesota. Well, it's happening at Indiana. But then again, Manny,
literally
that goes
the
back
number
to,
1 team in the country. Literally the number 1 ranked team in the country right now.
But then that goes back to, and people are going to say, oh, not last year, not last year. Indiana has incredible support from their administration, and they have some money buy-in that the University of Minnesota just simply doesn't have. And yes, they did have some of that prior to last year. It was more after last year going into year 2 of Cignetti, but it wasn't nothing in year 1. There was money behind them, and they went out and they found a good quarterback in the transfer portal, and they supplemented their roster. And yes, it was better this year because of the success last year. But if Minnesota can get to that point, you don't always have to be 7-5 going to the Rate Bowl. But largely, look, in the new world of college football, Manny, not a lot has changed. It's still the same teams that were competing for the college football playoff and going to the college football playoff, or in at that time, the New Year's Six. it's basically those same 10 to 15 teams. Look at the last national championships from the last 25 years. It's all the same teams 20 years ago that it is now. NIL did not change a ton. It does give the opportunity to a team like Minnesota to step up, but it's not super easy. So I don't want to sit here and throw stones at the University of Minnesota and say, oh, well, you know what? Stinks for you guys. You're 7-5 again. To a degree, it is kind of the reality of the situation that they're in. But again, they can step up and have nice seasons. And I do believe that we will see some of those seasons in the future. I don't know if it's next year, but it's possible. And the head coach here has shown that he can do it. And I believe that if given the opportunity and the resources that everybody else around him, more of his contemporaries in the Big Ten have more resources than coaches that have less. He's probably right in the middle, if not the bottom third. And if you want this team to compete at a higher level, be knocking on the Board of Regents and be telling anybody you know with money that likes Gopher football. And oh, by the way, basketball and hockey, they should be Venmoing some money to Dinkytown athletes or Mark Coyle.
Well, and here's the other part too, that kind of piggyback off of that. The reality is what it is in college football right now in terms of, yes, there's financial support, but also, there's financial support that's needed, but also, dude, the Big Ten's got 18 teams.
Yes.
Okay. So this is not the Big Ten of the 90s where there's 10 or 11 teams and you go 6-2 in the conference and you're probably tied with 3 other teams and you win the conference. And because you have the longest Rose Bowl drought, that means you go to the Rose Bowl. It's a lot harder to get into that upper half of this mega conference, which is basically like its own damn league right now. It's hard to do that. And that's not an excuse. It's just an explanation of what the reality is. And I think when you factor in the conference ballooning to 18 teams in the last few years, and the fact that the Gophers haven't had the kind of financial investment from the administration and other entities to get itself into a level where Indiana is right now, I think it's rather remarkable that they're sitting in sort of the part of mediocrity in this conference. Because how'd you like to be a Wisconsin Badgers fan right now?
Yeah, fair point.
How'd you like to be Wisconsin right now? They were 4-8 this year, 2-7 in the conference, and the sky is falling in Madison right now. And
they
Luke
claim
Fickell's going back. Luke Fickell's going to return, but that's another program that needs to step their game up from an NIL standpoint and from a financial support standpoint, because they're not just going to be able to recruit a bunch of farm boys from the Midwest and run the ball 75% of the time and beat people up anymore. You're not going to be able to do that anymore, and they're learning the hard way. So I think where the Gophers are at right now, we would love to see them be where Indiana's at right now, but that's going to take a commitment from people even beyond PJ Fleck, like we talked about, and it's going to take some luck. You're going to have to get a friendly schedule, and with the size that this conference is now, there's going to be some opportunities for you to have a year where there's no Ohio State, there's no Oregon, there's no Michigan, there's no, you know what I mean? There's going to be opportunities, but there's a lot of things that have to go into it that's going to make it happen. And we see a comment there that just came in. It said Minnesota ranked number 14 in NIL money in the Big Ten. That's 14th in an 18-team conference.
Yeah.
And they finished 5-4, right smack in the middle of the conference. So this is where we're at.
And assuming, Manny, that's correct, I know it's in the bottom tier, and I'm not saying that the comment is a lie. I just haven't been able to double check that.
Right.
You finished, I think, 9th in the conference. So again, people love to poke fun at PJ because he is an easy punching bag. He's out there. He puts himself out there. So he is an easy punching bag. But I routinely think that PJ punches above his weight class for the most part. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be step back seasons or disappointing seasons. He's had them. Just a handful of years ago, they had a losing record playing in insert Detroit Bowl name here. It's going to happen. It'll probably happen again for all we know. It could happen next year. And I get it. Money doesn't buy everything. There still needs to be a coaching element. We've made the baseball comparison before, Manny. Plenty of teams go into the year with a top 5 payroll, and oftentimes a couple of those teams end up being some of the first to sell at the trade deadline because it went haywire and didn't work. You still have to coach them, which, by the way, that's where I give Kirk Cinetti a ton of credit with the resources that they have this year to still bring kids in, to bring Fernando Mendoza in, perhaps at the time the best quarterback in the transfer portal, to bring him in, get him to buy into what they're doing and be able to have the season that they did. Good for him.
Freaking Heisman.
He won the Heisman. Correct.
Yes.
And then, by the way, Joey McGuire at Texas Tech. Texas Tech, again, people don't kid yourself. Texas Tech until this year had no business at all being in national championship conversation in college football. Now,
they've been irrelevant since Mike Leach, rest in peace, left. They've been completely irrelevant since he left.
And I don't think they're going to win the national championship. I happen to think they're going to lose to Oregon, but still, they're going to be in the final 8 this year, and they went out and freaking bought almost their entire defense. So it can be done, but sadly, in the world that we're living in, whether you like it or don't, if you want your favorite college football team to be good, you need to give them the resources. So we've really hopped off track here, which I think is good. It's a good conversation. I will say this too, and this is, to me, I think is where we don't give the head football coach enough credit. I don't have the entire list in front of me. Apologize for not. And I forgot even where I saw it earlier. I could probably find it in the Twitter timeline. The fact that this team year in and year out, Manny, has pretty good retention. I know we're still probably going to find a few players that are going to transfer and go somewhere else. But at this point, I think that list is going to be very small. Clearly, his players like him. So I think that that's another credit to PJ Fleck, to be able to get kids to come here, buy in. And let's be honest, Manny, I don't want to say put up with it, but the shtick and the culture and all that stuff is not for us. It's for the 18 to 22 to 24-year-olds that he brings in. Yep. And by and large, they like it because they stay around. And I think that's a plus to him. And I know it doesn't equate to winning football games. It won't ever save a head coach a job. But I think it's pretty darn cool how good they are in the community. And you see all this stuff around Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and what they're doing. This will sound bad. It's going to sound callous. It doesn't matter to me as much as winning. At the end of the day, I want my team to win and be relevant. But I also do like that they're representing the state and the university in a good way. And that 100% falls on the leader of the program, and that's the head football coach. So I give him kudos to that. And again, to kind of circle back to where we started this thing before we wrap it up, to be 7-0 in bowl games, whether you're playing in the worst bowl game or the best bowl game, that tends to mean you know what you're doing. You're clearly doing something different than most people.
Yeah, and you know, just going back to where we are now in terms of the state of college football, and you and I, we've talked ad nauseum off the air, with whether it's text messages or when we were seeing each other in person, about the college football playoff and the format and all that stuff. We've had our opinions about it, shared our opinions with each other about it. You know, with the way things are going, the reality is we're going down a path where really only one team in the world of college football at the end of every year is happy, and it's the team that wins the national championship. You know, we're going down that route now of, you know, where the days of, you know, programs that aren't in a position to compete for a national championships can still, you know, go to a quality bowl game and feel really good about the growth and building of their program. Those days are kind of behind us a little bit, you know, and so now everybody's focused on getting to the playoff and you know, winning a national championship. And, you know, now we're kind of at a point where winning a conference championship isn't held as in high as regard as it once was. And so I think because of that, unfortunately, we're kind of in this point now where we've got to find other things, you know, because of how hard it is to win a national championship, and because, you know, just playing on the Rose Bowl as sort of an exhibition game on New Year's Day as a goal is not a thing anymore. If you're playing in the Rose Bowl, that means you're playing in the college football playoff, and it's hard to get there now. There's got to be other things that you can find and sort of pick up from your program that your program is doing. And to your point, the way that these players, represent the university, carry themselves, the stuff that they do in the community, we're not hearing anything about scandals. We're not hearing anything about, players getting in trouble off the field. It's a really, and we make fun of the culture and roll the boat and all that stuff. People like to do that, but it's a program that, off the field has really been representing the university really well. And I think PJ deserves a lot of credit for that, for installing that culture. However you want to make fun of it, it's a culture that's representing the University of Minnesota really, really well. And I think he deserves a ton of credit for that. And it's you'd love to see them go 10-2 or 11-1 and make the college football playoff. You and I would both love to see that. I think all the fans watching this live stream right now would love to see that. But I think as long as they're representing the state and the university really well, I think that's to be applauded. And as long as they're being competitive and things aren't falling completely apart and they're going 2-10, again, I'll say it again. How would you like to be a Badgers fan right now? You wouldn't want to be a Badger fan right now. And in fact, a lot of Gopher fans are enjoying the fact that the Badgers are near the bottom of the Big Ten right now, and that the Gophers for the last half decade have kind of owned them. So I think, again, I'm not saying, be okay with and be satisfied. I'm not saying be satisfied with going 7-5, but it's not the worst thing in the world, because it could be a lot worse. Certainly we would like for it to be better, but it could also be much, much worse, as we see with some of the other programs in the conference.
Well, and I think you just have to have an appreciation and understanding of where you've been and not wanting to go back to it. And again, I've always said this too, when teams move on from head coaches, or when people say, oh, maybe baseball shouldn't move on from the manager, or, oh, if you fire the coach, but you hear it more in college athletics, who are we going to get that's any better? My reply to that has always been, it's not my job to hire who's better. That's up to the athletic director or the general manager, whatever it is. But I would say this too, for people that do get tired of the, 7-5, 8-4, whatever, win a Big Ten championship, get to the college football playoff, it can very easily turn the other way. And to your point, using Wisconsin, when Wisconsin hired Luke Fickell, I leaned back and I think I uttered an expletive, because I said, dang, is that bad? Because I think Luke Fickell can coach, and I still believe that he probably can. Now, trying to run his offense in cold, brutal weather in November, maybe he needs to figure some different things out there. But the Wisconsin comparison is a good one, because Wisconsin, when they announced they were going to retain Luke Fickell, they finally came out and said, oh, we're going to put more of an investment into the football program. So again, I can rip Minnesota and say, you need to do more, you need to do more, you need to do more. But at least in this case, they're ahead of your number one rival, at least at the moment. We'll see where Wisconsin goes from here. And who knows, Manny, that might not even fix it. Maybe the Gophers go to Madison next November and run one up on them and win the Axe again. Who knows? But yeah, to your point, at least they're not the Badgers right now. They won a bowl game. They've been to the Badgers have missed a bowl game 2 years in a row. And again, I get it. You only have to win 6 games to get to a bowl game. But again, Wisconsin didn't even do that. So I'll dance on that grave. Okay, a couple things from the game I want to call out specifically, Manny. And they're
very quickly before you do that. Just one last point on the Badgers. 9 Big Ten games this year, they scored 81 total points.
Yeah, that's incredible. I saw that stat a couple weeks ago.
Not even 10 a game. Not even 10 points a game in conference play.
Yeah,
it's bad. Nuts. It's bad over there, folks. It's bad.
They were atrociously bad. They were borderline. You thought the first half of New Mexico and Minnesota was unwatchable. That was 10 of the 12 games Wisconsin played this year. Yes. Okay, couple things from the game tonight that I did like that don't really have anything to do with anything. You know me, I'm a big uniform guy. Thought the Gophers uniforms were pretty good. Props for what they wore. I don't love when teams mix up their uniforms a ton, but I've seen New Mexico wear those uniforms before, and I really like them. I like that both teams essentially wore home uniforms.
It was kind of a Miami. Cool. It was kind of an old school Miami Dolphin. I saw those uniforms. I immediately thought 1970s Miami Dolphins with like Bob Greasy and Mercury Morris and those guys. It was that same kind of teal look with the jerseys.
I had the same Bob Greasy thought. And then I'll say this, in overtime, it's third down, and Drake Lindsay throws the ball to the end zone. And I thought it was going to be intercepted. But even if it wasn't, if that ball hits the ground, or if the Gophers run the ball on third and get stuffed, admit it, just like me, you were terrified of Brady Denenberg having to make a field goal to extend that overtime. Because I don't like to,
no faith.
I don't always like to make this a bash Brady Denenberg pod, but he's never really done anything in his entire college career to give me faith that kick was going to go through the upright. So thank goodness Jalen Smith snatched that touchdown from the jaws of an interception in triple coverage. Manny, I'm not convinced you'll see two better catches in a season than the two touchdown catches that he made tonight. The also both passes from Lindsay, and I think the first one was legitimately a great pass, but because of the camera angles in a baseball stadium, it looked like the highest lofting arcing pass you will ever see. And I don't really think it was. I think it was more of the camera angles. But those two catches by Jalen Smith, I mean, they're both Sports Center top 10 catches. I mean, that was a heck of an effort on both of those grabs. So just a really good night for him.
Yeah, and he's a guy too that I think you just hope that he can that this was a sign that he can kind of emerge. And obviously he's very young. He's just a freshman this year, that he can, we talked about improving the receiving core. Hopefully, he's a guy that can help you kind of do that internally as well, that he can just kind of continue to grow and develop into somebody that's going to be really, really good for you for the next couple of years. And, if him and Drake Lindsay can kind of establish a good rapport, and, maybe that's how you can kind of improve the passing game. You kind of do that from within. Obviously, you can go out and get somebody in the transfer portal and recruit somebody and bring somebody in. That I think that can only help you. It's not going to hurt you. But I see the comment there. That's great.
Some of us are excited about 8-win Rate Bowl championship football. Let's go.
But yeah, I think him having the type of night that he had in this game tonight, I think was big, because that's a sign that, he's somebody that can be a big part of this offense next year as well. So, yeah, he's talented. There's no question about it. I think it's just, can we see kind of that growth and improvement from him? Is he going to have a bigger role in the passing game next year, if and when he comes back? So, yeah, that's something definitely positive to be able to look forward to, from an offensive standpoint next year.
A couple of non-Gopher things for you in closing. So first off, I thought Kyle Whittingham was retiring.
I did too.
But then it turns out the terminology we're using was stepping down. Well, and I think I did see that initially, but I think my brain naturally went to, he's stepping down. That basically means he's retiring. He's in his mid 60s. He's been at Utah for, I think, 21, 22 years. I love Kyle. Yeah. I love Kyle Whittingham. Kyle Whittingham is quarterback injuries away from being in college football playoffs. His programs at Utah have been that good. For falling into a guy that I don't believe was Michigan's first choice, and I think this is probably a 3 to 5 year deal. I know it's a 5-year contract. I can't imagine Kyle Whittingham's going to do this for a long time.
He's 66 years old.
I think this is a really good hire for Michigan, if only just to stabilize the program and win 8 or 9 games for a few years and not have another scandal. I think this is, I don't know if it's a home run hire for Michigan, but it's a solid double to the gap.
It's a very good hire. And I think it's an opportunity for him. Well, before I go there, that's a great point about finding more, I think more than anything, stability in that program. And again, I'm saying this as a Gopher fan. I'm not, if Michigan wants to have all the scandal and controversy, and that means that they're going to fall
go ahead.
Go right ahead. That means more opportunities for the Gophers to win the jug. Okay. But seriously speaking, with all of the, this is a program that's 2 years removed from winning a national championship, but even that season in itself was not without controversy. And for all of the messy things that have sort of come out since then, they just need an adult in the room again with that program. And Kyle Whittingham is a guy that he is definitely going to be an adult in the room. And I think there's going to be a standard. There's going to be a standard in terms of, certainly there's a standard of winning with that program, but I think he's going to bring a standard of respectability and honor to that program, because I think that certainly, with what we've seen between the stuff with Sharon Moore that's transpired over the last month, the Connor Stallions stuff, speaking of people who I think need to just stop talking on the internet, Connor Stallions, but I digress. That's a whole nother topic for another podcast.
And the guy who gets into it with DK Metcalf and then holds a press conference with a hat on backwards. I think that guy also needs to stop talking on the internet.
Yeah. So with everything that's been going on at the University of Michigan, they just need somebody who's going to step in and just bring, I think, some real pure respectability back to that program. And Kyle Whittingham is somebody that can do that. And it's interesting because he was, I think, after last year, Utah went 5-7, I think, or something last year. There was talk that as Kyle Whittingham kind of worn out his welcome, as the time kind of passed him by, is it time for him to just step aside and be done? And and he came back because he didn't want to go out that way, and he came back and had a really nice year. You mentioned the injuries to the quarterback position and other positions, the other injuries that they've had
multiple years now, Manny. It's every year he loses a quarterback due to injury.
Yeah. And I think for them to come out and win 10 games this year, and very easily could have found themselves in the Big 12 championship game this year if some things had gone their way. But they had a really good year this year, and he was able to kind of walk away from there on a high note. And I think I'm with you. I mean, he's 66 years old, so this is not a decade long stay for him. But I think it's an opportunity for him to step in, kind of stabilize things, bring some respectability back to that program. And he's a good coach, and he's going to have resources there that, quite honestly, he didn't really have in Utah. And we saw the success that he was able to do for 2 decades with that program. He's going to have even more resources to do even more at the University of Michigan. And so he's a good coach, and it might be an opportunity for him to compete for a national championship if things go his way over the next 3 to 5 years. And he's going to bring some stability back to that program.
2 more very quick things, one national, then we'll finish with Gophers. I could be wrong here. If people watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, they know I'm wrong an awful lot. That's the beauty of being around with sports. You get to talk about it, have fun with it. You don't always have to be right. So I say all that to say this. I think Oregon is going to win the national championship. Who do you think is going to win the national championship?
I've got Georgia. I don't think Georgia is a perfect team, but this kind of feels like a year where Kirby Smart is going to get it done, and we've seen him obviously get it done. They're just a few years removed from getting it done in back-to-back years. There's just something about this team this year, I think, that I don't know, that I'm kind of gravitating to, that has me feeling like this is going to be the year that they do it again. They conquered Alabama in the SEC championship game, and Alabama's been a thorn in their side really ever since Kirby's been there. Really, even going back to the Mark Richt days, Alabama's been a thorn in Georgia's side. They just haven't been able to beat them, save for that title game a few years ago. So you know me, I think the world of Kirby Smart. I think Kirby Smart is awesome. I think he's a great coach.
I like him too.
Georgia. Yeah, what he's done at Georgia is just been incredible. The way that he has just really molded that into the powerhouse program that they are is incredible. And I think they're going to get it done this year.
When you and I record a podcast next year, and oh, by the way, for people watching, Manny and I will still be together probably weekly, sometimes perhaps twice a week when we really get into the thick of it. with the Big Ten basketball schedule. I think some of that will depend on how well the basketball team does or does not play throughout the season. But we will promise to you, Manny and I will get together at least weekly at some point during each week to talk Gophers for you. And I'd love to talk a little bit of Gopher hockey as well once that gets fired up after the new year. By the way, good luck to Coach Bob Motzko and Team USA and the World Juniors happening right down the road from you and I, Manny, at Grand Casino Arena. And the artist known as, no, I guess it still is Mariucci Arena. What do we call it? 3M Arena at Mariucci?
3M Arena. Yeah, I think it's 3M Arena at Mariucci. Somebody in the comments let us know what it is.
Bad deal for 3M. Well, maybe not. They're still getting the name recognition, but it's a bad deal because I can't tell you what it is. I think it's 3M Arena at Mariucci, something like that. Somebody will tell me. When you and I do this pod roughly a year from now, we don't know if the Gophers will even qualify for a bowl. I think they will. That's the spirit of the next question here, what we'll close with. Will the Gophers be playing in, it could be on a different day. Heck, it could be before Christmas. But in theory, Manny, just when you look at it from the 500-foot view, when you and I are doing our post-game bowl podcast next year, are the Gophers playing in a better bowl game than they played in this year, about the same, or worse? And I'll tee it to you this way. I think it better be about the same or better. My hunch is it will be better. I like the makeup of this team and where the program is at. I'm not saying it's going to be 10-2, you just missed the college football playoff and you're playing in a really great bowl game type of season. But my hunch is the Gophers find a way to just be a pretty solid 8-4 team next year. That's where I'm at. Where do you think this team is a year from now?
Yeah, I was thinking 8-4 too. I'm just kind of glancing over the schedule for next year.
It's not easy, but it's not murderer's row.
It's not hard. It's not hard. There's no Ohio State. There's no Oregon. And even sort of the tougher programs that are on the schedule are programs that are trying to kind of recover. Penn State's a program that had a down year this year and changed coaches, and we'll see how Matt Campbell does out there. But, you know, that's a program that's kind of in a transition right now. Michigan is a program we just hyped up Kyle Whittingham going there, but Michigan is a program that's kind of transitioning right now. You know, UCLA is still, I don't think they're going to be that much better. They might be a little better, but, you know, they're not going to suddenly turn into a power unless they just get a ton of NIL money, which I highly doubt. So
not with what they were trying to pay head coaches the last few times around. So
exactly. I think Nico Iamaleava is making pretty much all of the money there right now, but I digress. I had to get my shot in at him. Yeah, I mean, it's not an impossible schedule. There's not a game on here where I look at and just say, yeah, they got no shot. Absolutely no chance. This year, it was like you looked at Ohio State and Oregon, and you were like, yeah, that just don't even bother even having that conversation. Now, I think going into next year, I think there's certainly not going to pick them to go 12-0 or anything, but I think you can kind of look at these games and say, all right, well, with the players they have coming back, if they can get some other guys in the transfer portal to come in and step in and play big roles, maybe they can find a way to beat a Michigan at home. Maybe they can find a way to maybe go into Happy Valley and find a way to eke out a win. It's not, that's not something that we haven't seen before. We've seen that happen before. So it's possible that they can win 8 games, maybe 9 if something goes their way. And then I think at that point, by default, I think they would have to be playing in a better bowl game. And the Rate Bowl is not a bad bowl. It's just, if you find a way to win 8 or 9 games next year, which is possible, you might be playing in somewhere like Nashville or Vegas, like you were talking about earlier.
Of course, classic Ross fashion, I do have one more thing. I think you will know, Manny, with this team next year, how good they can be after game number 2. I'm not saying that Mississippi State's going to be a national championship contender, but that's a pretty darn difficult team to have to play.
That's an SEC team, man. That's an
in
SEC
the non-conference team. It's a team that didn't have a great record this year, but at times did play well. They did have one really nice win, and I'm not remembering it. Maybe you will. Believe they knocked off somebody in the top 25.
Well, they almost took out my Vols
Okay, so that's one of them.
Tennessee needed overtime. Well, Tennessee won, but they needed overtime to win the game. Thanks to some questionable clock management by Josh Heupel at the end of regulation.
No, not Josh Heupel.
I digress. But yeah, I mean that's a program that, again, Mike Leach, rest in peace. Like he had them competing pretty good, towards, during his time there. So, when he tragically passed away, they had a little bit of a dip, but that's a program that we've seen have success and have good seasons in the past, and they could be trending upward. So that's not going to be an easy task for them.
College football's there's never going to be another Mike Leach, but perhaps the closest thing to Mike Leach these days, Manny, the Gophers just played against him. Jason Eck is incredibly hilarious. I've had a ton of fun watching New Mexico games this year because I watch way too much college football, and his press conferences are great. He does seem like a nice, genuine guy. It was tough to beat him. Well, now, granted, I didn't play, but you know what I mean. Tough to watch him lose, but a fun guy. And I'm sorry, Lobos fans, but he's not going to be there very long. I'd be surprised if he's there after next season. If that team goes 7-5 or better next year, Jason Eck's going to get himself a job somewhere in the Power 4, or at least a better Group of 5 job. And that's no shade at New Mexico. I think everything New Mexico's done athletically is a great job. Richard Pitino would still be there if he didn't get a top 25-ish job in college basketball to coach Xavier. So no shade to New Mexico at all. Manny, that's all I got for you. This was a ton of fun. I've had a ton of fun doing this with you this year. We kicked off Gophers 101 at the Minnesota State Fair this year, right after the game against Buffalo, and we've carried it all the way through. So thank you so much for being a part of this. Again, you're going nowhere. We're going to, through the basketball season and probably even into the, I guess, downtime, we're going to try and talk weekly, and this will be fun. And I do believe hopefully next year will be a ton of fun talking Gopher football again. We know there'll be some excruciating losses. There almost always are, unless you're one of the 8 teams currently still playing for the college football playoff. But we also know more than likely one of the best parts of the PJ Fleck regime, Manny, there's typically a fun win or two along the way as well. So we'll have fun talking about it all next year. So thanks again, my man. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Bowl Mania, by the way. I still think we have, 65, 70% of the games to go. We're still getting fired up. I mean, I think we got 8 games on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I can't wait for the playoff quarterfinal games, because now we're getting into the New Year's 6 bowl games now the rest of the way for the playoff. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to some of these other bowl game matchups, and yeah, it's going to be a fun holiday season, and we'll dive back into some Gopher basketball as well, as they get deeper into the Big Ten calendar. It's probably going to be a bit of a struggle, as we've kind of learned, but I think it'll still be I think they'll still be a fun team to talk about throughout the winter.
Well, and it's year 1 of a new regime, so the struggles are to be expected even in today's day and age, and I'm willing to see how it plays out before absolutely filleting or crucifying Nico Medved. I have zero judgment this year. Every win is going to be great. Every loss is whatever.
As long as they're fun, as long as the games are fun and entertaining, and they seem to play a fairly entertaining brand of basketball. The reality is they're just not very good, and that's okay right now considering where the program is at. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about them and diving more into them as we progress through the winter as well. And so, like you said, I'm not going anywhere. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, and Manny, the Golden Gopher spring game, should the weather allow it, is only 4.5 months away. So we'll be talking Gopher football before you know it. Thanks, Manny.
You got it, pal.
That is Mr. Manny Hill. I am Ross Brendel. If you're watching on YouTube, please comment, please like. Also, make sure you are following the Score North channel. And if you're listening via podcast, please rate and review kindly. That's Manny Hill. I'm Ross Brendel. Thank you so much. Gophers 1-0 in Rate Bowl championship season, beating New Mexico by a final score of 20-17. Row the boat, Sky Yuma, and go Gophers.